Hello everyone, Duffy here with Hula-Cow Studios. I have been asked by several people to do a quick tutorial on just an absolute beginner's guide to getting started with audiobooks. And so this is going to be a crash course. And buckle up, Buttercup, because this is going to be about the crashiest crash course that we could possibly come up with on short notice. So the first thing that we want to start with is, in order to start narrating audiobooks or doing any kind of voice work, you will need a microphone and some other equipment. Now, the kind of microphone that you want is going to vary, but real quick, let's just go over this. The first kind of microphone that you have is going to be, and this is an old one, but a large diaphragm condenser microphone. This is probably going to be your preferred style of microphone for this because it has decent sound quality. They pick up a lot of detail in the sound. The downside is they're sensitive, so if you're in a very noisy environment, they will pick up all that. But most of you are going to be using a large diaphragm condenser mic. You talk into the front of it. Some of you will be using a small diaphragm condenser mic, or a pencil mic, or a shotgun mic. This is a lot more unusual, and some of you who have access to professional studios will probably see these and will probably be using something to this effect. You talk into the front of it, and you do it at a larger distance than these because these are meant to be pointed at things that are a little further away. A very few of you will be using what is called a dynamic microphone. It's a stage microphone. These things are a lot less sensitive, which means they will tolerate a whole lot of, they'll mitigate a whole lot of room noise, but the sound that comes off of them is not as detailed. There is your crash course on microphones. Most of you will be using a large diaphragm front address condenser microphone. If you have questions on what type or what brand or something like that, that's a different discussion, but the assumption is going to be that you're going to be using one of these. And regardless of what kind you use in your mic mount, you want a pop filter, one of these little pantyhose lollipop looking things. These stop plosives, so if you put it between you and your microphone and talk and say, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, it's not going to go whomp, 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 whomp. You need one of these. This is pretty much the rundown for the microphone equipment. Along with a microphone, you're going to have an interface that plugs into your computer. And we're going to go over this real quick because you'll notice that a lot of these have two holes in them, and when you start out you're probably only going to be using one of them, but when you get a little more advanced and you start learning about setting the gain, and we'll go over that in just a second, actually let's do it now, you want to set the gain on your interface so that when you talk normally, and I'll show you on here, actually let me fire this up. Testing, 1, 2, 3. See, that gain is way too high because at my normal volume, you can see that that waveform is just huge. And if I shout, yeah, you can't do that. So we're going to turn that down. Now, see where that is? If I'm doing normal speech, that's about where you want normal speech to show up on this. And if I shout, I'm not going over the top level of the sound envelope. So when you set the gain on your interface, the little knobs here, gain is not volume, and that's a discussion for another time. When you set the gain on these things, you want to be sure that talking looks about like what you see here, a smaller waveform on the screen, because when you shout, you don't want it to make a terrible, horrible, distorted, awful sound. So when you set the volume on this thing for your microphone, be sure that your regular talking volume looks a lot like what you see on the screen before you. Now, you also see two channels there, and that's because I'm recording in stereo, which is not necessary for audiobooks, but if you have a splitter, and this is an advanced topic, if you have a splitter, you can plug one end into each of these things, the other end into your microphone, and you can set the gain differently. So you can crank one of these two channels down really, really far, and you don't have to come and fiddle with your gain here. If you suspect that you're too loud, you're too soft, blah, 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 you set one very, very, very low, and that's your backup in case you shout and it gets too loud on the other one. That might be a lot to throw at you all at once and slightly out of order, but since we're going over the equipment, it might be something you wanted to know. So you have a microphone, you have your interface, you know how to set your gain. And as you can see, like I've been talking this whole time, and all of the waveform above me has been fairly low, and it's not getting anywhere near the top or the bottom of the little envelope window that it's in. If I shout, yeah, see, if I raise my voice, those little red lines, that's bad news. It means that sound is distorted, and it's no good. But if I had the second channel on this turned down, that bottom channel would not have done that. It would have been really quiet, and we could have copied that up to the top bit later. But enough about that. You'll want to know that later, because when you get into 15, 16, 20, 80 hours of recording audio, that stuff is handy, believe me. Last but not least, when you edit audio, you're going to want a good pair of headphones so that you can listen closely. This is not it. But for your cleaning and for getting everything ready for your audiobook or any other recording endeavor, you do want to be able to hear what you're doing. So having a semi-decent pair of headphones is going to be great. And that pretty much covers the equipment. You need a microphone, an interface, and headphones. One other thing that I might suggest that I like to make my life so much easier is a macro pad. They sell them for $15. We'll get into that in a minute. For now, let's move on to your room treatment. And to do that, we're going to switch over here real quick. What is room treatment? Well, you see a lot of people talking in sound booths. If you're watching this, you probably don't have one. And so what you need to do is you need to figure out a way to keep your voice from echoing off the walls. You hear my voice because I'm in my kitchen, and I'm doing that on purpose so that you can really hear the echo in my voice. And that's bad when you're doing audiobooks because it sounds like you're in a room. You don't want it sounding like you're in a bathroom reading a book. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll build like out of PVC pipes or out of a rack or something. They'll have a nice little enclosure, and they'll put a whole bunch of blankets or pillows or things like that on top of it. And what you want to be able to do is talk into it and put the microphone inside and make like a little cave. And the larger the better. Pillows, blankets, cushions, foam, whatever. But make sure that when you speak into it, your voice doesn't come back off of the walls like that. And to really hit home the point, like say you are here and I'm drawing with a touchpad, so please forgive me. And you have your little doolally here. Yay, perspective. Okay, we are a great artist, and there's your microphone with its little cable. When you talk, your voice goes out, right? And when it hits the walls, it comes back. Okay? And it does that like 360 degrees around you. So even the stuff that's going this way will come back and into the microphone. What having this does, and like our little dude should probably be a bit closer to it. What this does is it actually prevents that from happening. It keeps your voice inside the enclosure, and whatever little bit of it does make it out probably does not make it back to the microphone all that well. That is what having room treatment means, whether it's a sound booth or a small enclosure or something like that. And if you guys need help with that, I do have a short video about that. But just keep in mind what you're trying to do with that. You're trying to make sure that as you talk, your voice does not hit the wall and come back at you. And again, the reason I picked this location is because it's really easy to hear here, and you can hear it happening. But that's pretty much it for room treatment. It doesn't matter what you use for it. You can like build a fort out of your couch cushions. You can get like some PVC pipes and stick them together and put like 5 or 6 blankets on top of it, pillows, whatever. As long as it does the job, it does not matter. Don't use anything with stiff, hard plastic or metal sides like a Tupperware container. They make this weird little buzzing sound and it's just awful. And good headphones will let you hear that once it's recorded. So, enough of that, we're moving on. But I cannot stress how important sound treatment is. It is the most important step to having good audio. Moving on. Recording. When you start recording your audiobook, you are going to want to, again, set your gain so that as you talk, it is a reasonable level, and see about where it is now. That's about right for a speaking volume if you have a fairly even, consistent delivery. I do not. I tend to do a very dynamic read. I'll get, very quiet. And then, we get loud. And you see, right there, it's already a bad take because I've gotten too loud for the thing. So my settings will differ from yours. And in fact, usually mine look about like this for standard talking volume. And you can see it looks very, very low. Don't worry about that, because as long as the quality is there, like as long as it has captured, as long as it's not so low down that it's not actually catching some stuff, you're fine. Like, as long as you don't drop the gain down so far that increasing the volume does not restore all of the quality, you're good. So don't necessarily worry about it being too low, because usually it's not. The only problem is too high. And you'll figure it out, but like I would suggest reading a chapter and then testing it out and listening to it and seeing how it. Figure out where your gain settings need to be for the correct volume for this. That's about what mine should look like. Well, that's about what mine should look like when I'm reading, because I know what my volume is. And like, you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, gee, that's awful low. No, not really, because if we amplify it, like, it will pop right back up, and it sounds fine. Listen. Yeah, usually mine look about like this for standard talking. Actually, let's check OBS and make sure I'm still talking. Yes, good. But the thing is, that is about where you want your sound levels. Now, to record these things, you just, again, set this thing recording and you read your book. Now, I've had a lot of you ask about mistakes and things like that when you're reading, and a lot of people will tell you, use a dog clicker. See that? You can actually see that right there. So you're reading something, you make a mistake, and there it is. You can actually see that fairly well. You can see that fairly well. See what I did there? And that's fine. That's great. Dog clickers are handy, especially like if you spam them, you can see them really well. You see how that really shows up on the waveform up there. Now, that's all well and good. I have a better way. And here's what you're going to want to do. If you go to edit here and you go to labels, and like it is not available right now because I'm not recording, so let's start recording. We go to edit, we go to label, and we said add label at playback position. Bad take. And I keep going. So, like, now I can continue reading, and we'll grab a book. Hey, it's my book. Woo. So we say, Millie was busy pouring the perfect amount of cream into her tea. At the moment, that amounted to yeah. And then, of course, we come up here and we go to the labels and we say bad. Excuse me. Add label at selection, and we say bad. Not selection. Add label at playback position. And we say bad. And there's our bad take. Millie was busy pouring the perfect amount of cream into her tea. Okay, you guys get the idea. Now that seems cumbersome, right? Because you've got to click and blah and and whereas with the dog clicker, you can just and you see it there, okay? But remember this thing? Remember the little $15 macro pad that I set up earlier? And again, if you're going to be doing a lot of audiobooks, you're going to want to invest in these things, and here's why. If you do a bad take, right there. So, say I wanted to do a thing and had a bad take. So, it had obviously once been a place well traveled, and of some impetus. It had obviously been a place well traveled, and one of some importance. Neither of them could imagine why it would have been placed out here, other than it had to have been centrally located between some point A and some other point B, neither of which were in existence anymore. Okay, now this is good because you can see I've had several mistakes here, and you're like, Duffy, mistakes are good? Yes, because I need to show you how to trim these. If we go back to the beginning here, like you can see where the bad take is, but I don't need to scroll through like an hour of reading to find where this bad take is. If I hold the Alt key on my keyboard and press right, it skips me right to the bad take. And look, I can take where I left off and I can highlight from the beginning of the bad take to the beginning of the good take, and I hit delete, and boom, we're right there. We've got that one taken care of. Now I can see the other bad take, so I don't need to do it. But if I hold Alt and I hit right, it skips me right to this bad take. Like I can grab this, I hit delete, boom. I hold Alt, I skip right to the next one. Actually, there it is. And I mean, you can listen to these and like hear what they're doing, and hear where the thing is. Spacebar is play. So listen. Hit delete, listen again, and you realize that it picks up and leaves off at the same point. Always good to get a pair of ears on things to hear what you're doing, even though this is very visual. And it's a very quick way. Oh, look, hey, here's another bad take. So we can, boom. There's another one. Boom. But you guys get the idea. With the with the dog clicker, like we can absolutely do the same thing, but with the dog clicker I have to go through and scroll and look and find them, whereas with like the little flags here, I just hit Alt, right, and boom, I'm right there at the next one. So all I have to do is grab the bad part, delete, and we're done. So that will save you a ton of time, because if you're going along and recording and you do a bad take, then see, you can see it real easily. And then you can go back and fix it. I don't like how I said that. And then you can go back and fix it. Also, you notice that weird little flag there that says BFEM. And not bad. That's because I screwed up. But I have multiple buttons on this thing, okay? Now, I know we're kind of getting into a rabbit hole about, like, macro pads, but you can easily do this by going up to the edit menu and saying add label at playback position, and you can add your own if you so desire. You don't have to just use labels for bad takes. Like if you have something that requires an extra ear, like you're doing a character voice, and you want to be sure to listen to it afterwards, even if it's a good take, or if there's a special effect you want to put in, like an echo, or some other like thing that you need to do to that portion of the audio. Like sometimes I'll do two characters and it says, they said in tandem, and I'll record both characters saying it and go back and overlay them. And I can do that with a pause or a rest, or just spam a bunch of things here and make a note of it, that I want to do multiple characters at the same time. If your author wants you to do a little chime or a bell at scene transitions, I can tell it to put in a scene transition. With labels like this, it makes your life easier. And you can map them to your keyboard, too. You don't need to have a macro pad, although, again, for $15, and you're going to be doing this a lot. Great investment. But yeah, so cleaning the bad takes out of the audio is very, very easy. Just like if you use the label feature, just hold Alt and go to the next flag, delete. Oh, there's another one. And of course, this is difficult to see because like I was just rambling when I put these in. Let me actually show you something. This is a bad take. This is a good take. So, like, you will see here that typically there'd be a label right here that you'd put in after a bad take, or a dog click or something like that. Visually editing is nice because you can kind of see that the beginnings of these takes look almost, well, the entire take looks almost identical. And you'll learn about that. Visually editing takes is helpful because, I mean, you want to click spacebar and like listen to the beginning of it and then listen to the beginning of this one, because you don't want to cut off a breath mid-breath because it sounds really weird if a breath cuts off in the middle. So listen for that while you're doing it. That's important. So, hello, yeah, you. Like if you're drifting off right now, hi. Yeah, that's important. So when you're trimming off bits and bobs of like bad takes, be sure to listen and don't cut breaths in the middle because it sounds freaking weird, okay? Let's see what else we got. We covered all the cleaning and stuff like that. Now, when you finally get done recording your track and it's at the end of it, you're going to want to produce it and prepare it. So, as you're recording, when you get to the end of it, what you want to do is pick a time when it's very quiet in the room. You know, well, very quiet in general. And it's called rolling for room tone. And at the end of your take, you can mark it like this. Or you can just clap. You know, or use your dog clicker. Doesn't matter how. But at the end of your reel, you want to leave about 5 to 10 seconds of pure silence, like this. Why? Because that is your room tone. And every microphone, every piece of equipment, everything that you hook into your computer that captures audio makes its own self-noise. It's a little hiss. Plus, you kind of hear the sound of the ambient room. And you don't want any of that in there. So what we're going to do is we are going to do what's called a noise reduction. It will clean out the room tone. But this is important, so listen. When you clean out the room tone, whatever you select is what gets stripped out. So if your kid shouts, if a dog barks, or if there's any kind of noise, it will strip those noises out of the sound of your voice too, because the tool does not discriminate. If there is a big sound in like a 300 hertz range, that's in the middle of your voice range, and your voice will sound all warpy and weird because it will try to clean that out of your voice. So we go to Effect, we go to Noise Reduction, and no, wait. First of all, we highlight and select the room silence, right? So that we get a sample of it. So this is just pure silence, and it's good to listen to it real close to make sure that there's nothing else weird in there. We go to Effect, we go to noise reduction, and you can see like over here I have all kinds of like keyboard shortcuts hooked up for this. You can also map those to a macro pad. I've got a bigger one, and that saves time, but on to the more appropriate things. Once you have selected your room tone noise, tell it to get noise profile, okay? And then you're going to select all, the entire track. You're going to go back to effect. You're going to go into noise reduction and say, okay this time. Now, noise reduction, sensitivity, frequency, smoothing bands, the settings here are fine. If you want to tinker with them, great, but I usually use 13, 6, 3, and reduce. Hit OK, and now all of that room tone is removed from the whole thing. Again, if in your 5-second sample there's anything weird, like any sounds, ticks, talks, knocks, bumps, whatever, it will remove those sounds from your voice too, and your voice will sound weird. So be sure that your sample is pure silence. And that's one of the most important steps in cleaning this thing. Now that you've trimmed it, now that you've cleaned it for noise, you need to prep it for online booksellers like ACX. And Findaway and Authors Direct and Apple and Kobo and blah, 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 blah. So whatever you're doing, it's fine. But let's show you something here. If I'm recording this and there are quiet bits like this, and then I get really loud, okay, and then I go back to being quiet because one of the characters has shouted. Okay, look at that. Look at that above me right there. You see that? That is a problem. That is a problem up there, right there, because this part is fine and this part is fine. But like, say they've been listening to this part for 15 minutes and they want to hear it real good. So the listener has cranked up their volume on their little iPod or their player or whatever, right? What do you think's going to happen when they get to this point? Yeah, it's going to blow their head off. And if you submit something like this to ACX, they're not going to accept it anyway. They're going to say that the average volume level is inconsistent, and they're going to get really mad at you. And you're going to be like, well, why won't ACX accept my files? That's why. Also of note, there's a couple of other things we'll go over in a minute, but let's stay on topic. This is what compression is for. So after you noise reduce this, you're going to want to apply a compressor. Now, the settings here are very mild, but basically what a compressor does is it will take sounds that are very loud, that go over a certain volume, and it will reduce any parts of the sound that go over that volume by a certain amount. And it will also like bring up the other sounds to match a certain base minimum. So as it reduces those sounds, it will also increase the volume of the entire track so that the lower sounds are brought up. So it's like, here's a really loud part, let's make it quiet. Then we'll bring all the volume up again. And then, okay, so we'll reduce that one again, and then we'll bring the whole thing up again. And if you see it in action, and I'm just going to repeat it over and over because, like, this is not how you use one, but I just want you to see how it works gradually. As we gradually do it, see, the rest of it is coming up to speed, but that loud part doesn't look, see, and again, that's not how you use it. I just wanted to see it step by step by step, just gradually. That loud part now is not any louder than the quiet parts. Now, the quiet parts look really, really, really loud, but like you adjust the volume on that, and look, we now have everything of a consistent volume, right? Look up there. Everything is a consistent volume. So if they're going along listening to the quiet parts and the loud part comes along, you know, because you shouted for it and because it's an accurate performance, it's going to sound like someone shouting. But volume-wise, it's not actually going to be any louder than the other parts of the thing. So it's a consistent volume, and it's not going to blow somebody's head off. Again, there is a trick to doing this to where it's not, it doesn't sound really weird and super over-processed. And that's something that you guys are going to have to tinker with on your own, because it is different for every microphone. It's different for every delivery. Different people have different styles. But generally what I like to do is I will find a compressor setting that works for me, and I will kind of stick with it. But something that a friend of mine, and I don't know their real name, I'm sorry, they go by Audiobook on online, but two-stage compression is good. And what I was doing before, where it was bit by bit by bit, that's a little too bitsy piecey. But if you do compression gently in like 2 or 3 stages, as opposed to just doing it all in one big honking block, it gradually puts the levels to something consistent, and it doesn't make the sound as super over processed, because if you yank the low ones up and you squish the high ones all in one go, it kind of makes a big leap, and it's harsh because it has it's not a very complex algorithm in Audacity, because it's a basic compressor. Not that it's not a good one, but if you do it in smaller stages, you can kind of fine tune it, and it's not as harsh, and it doesn't sound as overly processed. So do compression gently and in multiple stages when you have to do it. But that is what that effect does. Compressor will take your audio that is inconsistent in volume, and it will slightly reduce the volume of the louder parts while bringing up the volume of the lower parts in a way that doesn't make it sound like you've just jacked the volume on those parts and make it sound wildly inconsistent with the louder parts after you do, because what you don't want it to do is sound like you've been talking like this, and then it gets to a shout and it sounds like this in the background. No. And see, that sounds weird. Compression keeps that from happening and ensures a consistent level. Real quick, for online things like audiobooks, ACX, Authors Direct, Findaway, there's a couple of other things that you have to remember when prepping them. Leading silence. They want... yeah, sure, why not? They want somewhere between 0.5 and 1 second of silence at the beginning of each chapter. And when they say between 0.5 and 1, they mean it. So this is an expressly ACX thing, but I find that formatting it like this helps you out with other places that you're going to upload your audiobook to. Always make sure that the opening silence falls exactly between 0.5 and 1.0 seconds, because if it falls like right at 1 second or right at 0.5 seconds, ACX is picky, and there's like, well, there's not enough silence, or there's too much silence, and it's like, so 0.7 seconds at the beginning of the files, people. Likewise at the end, they say between 1 and 5 seconds. I generally stick with about 3 because it's right between there, and it's right in the middle of the safety zone. They also say normalize your file. What does normalize mean? Well, like, say you wanted to adjust the volume of this file, right? And you can see that right now it's adjusted at -0, which, to the layman, see how the tops of the peaks are touching the very tops and bottoms of the envelope? That means that these files are as loud as they can possibly be without distorting. This right here, well, actually, this little red one right here is a good example, because these are touching it, and that means that this will distort if it goes any louder. What they want you to do is change the amplification for the entire file so that it is 2 to 3 decibels below that line, meaning that the volume can be increased a few decibels before it begins to distort. ACX says 3. I generally do I generally do 2 decibels, just because if I do 3 and there's quiet parts in the read, it gripes at me, and I found 2 works better than 3. But like ACX will tell you 3, so if you're wanting to go by the book, then adjust the entire volume level to where it's -3. Now, Normalize will do this for you, and it has several tools, but basically what you want to do is normalize peak amplitude to -3. And I'm doing 2 because I will forget that it's on 3, and then I'll hit the shortcut button, and it'll keep doing 3, and I'll wonder why the heck it's doing it. But what this does is it will take if you normalize to -2 decibels, it will take the loudest point of the entire file, or whatever you've selected. I've selected the entire file. And it will adjust the entire volume of the selection so that the loudest part of it, the peak of that, is exactly -2 decibels, like below the loudest it can get, before it will start to distort. That's all that normalization means, is adjusting the volume based on the loudest part of the volume. I mean, that's an oversimplified explanation, but it's what you need to know. And so that's what you have. You record it, you allow 5 seconds of silence at the end. You can flag it, you can do clicks, but if you do clicks, you're going to have to listen to the whole thing again and skim through and hope you don't miss any. So I would invest $15 in a macro pad, or use just a shortcut on your keyboard, because you can do that too. This is so much easier. But yeah, that's basically it. You want a good microphone, you want to treat your area, you record, you mark your bad takes as you record, you go back at the end, you cut out your bad takes, you do a nice noise reduction to get rid of the background noise, you do your preparation and your compression on your files so that it's got consistent audio volumes, and you're good to go. Now, here's where you might want to stick with me if you want to really get good at this and become an expert at this. In addition to noise reduction and compression, there's some other things you can do. And this is going to be a tool that I paid for, so well, actually this one isn't. You can get other compressors. This is a different compressor to the one that comes with Audacity, and it sounds different. And you can actually see the difference, because if I apply it, yeah, see, that looks a little different, doesn't it? See, the waveform is looking slightly different than it did when I used the other compressor. That's because this compressor works a little different, sounds a little different. I like this compressor, Blockfish. It's free. I don't like the little dials instead of, typing in number values, but, whatever. There's a lot of different compressors out there. Find one that works for you. I like the one that's built into Audacity. I like Blockfish. For me, I tend to use Audacity's first for the first stage of compression. I use Blockfish for the second stage. If I need a third stage, I go back to Audacity. And sometimes you do if you have an extremely varied dynamic read. Other tools you may be interested in. Mouth declick, or any kind of declicker. It gets rid of those little clicky, ticky mouth noises that you have when your tongue's too dry. And it will get too dry if you're doing a 4-hour read of an audiobook. This is a paid tool. This is a very expensive, well, not very expensive, but if you're an amateur, it's expensive for you because you can't cost justify purchasing it if you don't have a studio. There's a lot of free tools like this. By far, this is absolutely the best tool I've ever come across for removing mouth noise and mouth clicks. But if you want a good professional sounding recording, you will want to get a declicker or a mouth noise removal tool and run it on your file. Now, you don't have to. It's a good idea. Because those little mouth noises will start driving you crazy when you learn how to hear them. Again, this is a paid tool. There are free ones out there that work pretty well. There's even a declicker that is built into Audacity. And if you don't use these settings, do not use these settings. In fact, maybe I do have a preset that... No. Yeah, find some settings that work for your mouth noise, because playing around with it is helpful. The last thing you're going to want to maybe do to your audio is a gate. This is then this looks complicated. Don't sweat it. Don't sweat it. What a gate does, and it's this little section right here that says minus 41 dB. If any standalone noise is below a certain volume, and in this case, negative 41 dB, which, remember how we talked about this sound envelope before? The top of it is 0, and like anything over that will distort. If anything is 41 decibels or lower, below getting to the maximum volume of that, this will just delete that sound entirely. So really tiny little sounds in the background, like breathing or snuffling, or like a pin dropping in the far corner of the room. It will get rid of all that. Now, the problem with a gate is you have to be careful with your settings, because sometimes your breathing will go below and above that, so you get these weird little short half breaths if you use a gate. So be careful if you're using a gate. A gate will get you very clean sounding audio, because all of the spots in between you talking will be dead silent, and it will sound great. Unless you use it wrong, and then you'll get little half weird half breaths that kind of halfway made it through the gate, and that sounds weird and odd, and you don't want that. So if you don't know what you're doing with a gate, maybe don't start out using it. Maybe play with it, see, experiment, yada yada. But like, ignoring all this crapola over here, this particular gate comes with Reaper, and you can use it in Audacity. Audacity, I think, has its own gate, but like, I generally find that after you have cleaned and processed and compressed your audio for consistent volume, like, this ain't there yet. So let's go ahead and add our compressor, yada yada. After your audio looks about like this, you're probably pretty safe in doing a gate to it, because all of the stuff is compressed to hell and back, and like, anything below 41 dB is pretty surely going to actually be something that needs to be silent. So if we apply that, boom, that was fast. Now, any part of this file that had a little tick or click or something like that and nothing else on it is just dead silent. And I hope that makes sense. But it's just another way of cleaning up your audio and making it sound a little bit better. By the way, if you highlight something and hit Control-E, well, that's too far. It zooms in on it. But, yeah, let's actually do better here. This is a part where I am talking. This is a part where I am talking. This is well, that's too big, but so like, look, if we zoom in here, there's a lot of silence in between the talking parts, but if we run a compressor, and I'll show you this, a whole bunch, you can see it's not actually silent. See all that junk in there? See all this little weird stuff here? Well, like, most of the time noise reduction will remove most of that, but what a gate will do is remove that if it's below a certain threshold. So if I ran a gate on this and all that was below minus 41 dB, it would get rid of it and leave all the parts with my voice alone. Very valuable tool for getting very clean sounding audio, but you want to be careful with it. Let's recap. Recording. Marking your bad takes. I suggest you do flags, because then you clean your audio and trim out all the flubs. And if you trim flubs that you've put flags in there for, you can just use Alt and then the right arrow to skip from flub to flub to flub and clean them out. Boom, 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 boom. Like, I can get an hour-long file done in 6 minutes. It's not bad. After you've trimmed your audio, do your noise reduction, do your compression, do your mouth noise removal, your click removal, do your gate if you're going to. Make sure your volume level is consistent. Make sure there's 0.7 seconds of silence at the beginning of it if you're submitting to ACX. Make sure there's 3 seconds of silence at the end for the same reason. And you're good to go. The only thing you have left to do is save it. And when you save it, you want to save it as MP3. You want to export in 192 kilobit 44,100 hertz rate, or like, see right here, the project is, you want either 44,100 or 48,000, so 48 kilohertz or 44,100. Both are fine. It's an audiobook, and you're compressing the living piss out of it, so it's not that important. Which one you choose, just so long as it's one of those. When you export it to MP3. Yeah, here we go. Export to MP3, 192 kilobits per second. MP3, constant bit rate, and here it is. Force export to mono. You want a mono file. 2 reasons. 1, does not need to be stereo. Number 2, well, ACX requires mono. And number 3, mono is half the size of a stereo file. If you're like me and you record in 18, 20 channels, just delete all the other channels that you're not using. Expert tip. Say you do record in 2 channels. Split stereo to mono. Say this is the bad one and this is the salvage track. You can actually copy from the good track and paste that onto the track where you've screwed up. So like, say this top track was the safety track where you had everything dialed down a little bit quieter, and this bottom track is the good track where you screwed up and got it too loud and screamed just a little bit too loud. You can copy this from the safety track and paste it on this. Then after that, you can adjust the volume a little bit. Yep, hang on. Yeah, amplify. Yay. And it's as loud as it... I did a little bit too much, but yeah. If you have a spare safety track with a microphone splitter, you can have these different 2 different tracks on 2 different volume levels, and then once you're done with them, you get all of the salvage tracks from the backup track, adjust their volume level, get rid of that track at the end. And looky there, we have a good track, and we don't have any bad takes where it's just gone way over the volume that it should, and they haven't clipped, and you're good. You don't have to get back in the booth and record something and splice it in and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that's the crash course on doing audiobooks. Save them in MP3, upload them to ACX, or find a way, Authors Direct, Scribe, Kobo, whoever else you're uploading to, and enjoy. Hope you enjoyed this, and I will be around if you need me. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.